Yeah, all good. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining. So excited to be speaking with you all. And one thing just before we kick off, please interrupt us at any time. We'd love this to be more of a discussion than a couple of talking floating heads, just ranting for a while. So please don't be shy. And as you probably know, because you signed up, we're talking about NOD. And I'm just going to jump right into introductions. And Emily, if you want to start, I will kick it over to you and we can go from there.
All right, Emily Love. I'm with the Colorado Education Initiative. I'm the Chief of Research and Development. So my background is in qualitative research methods. And currently I'm working with our team to support a lot of our development activities at CEI, anywhere from contracting to grant writing. So I don't get to do research all that often, but in this project, I got to engage in that. So Colorado Education Initiative, I'll give you just a high level overview of our organization. We are now a team of 30 folks. We're based in Denver, but we work statewide across Colorado. And our main roles are basically a statewide convener. So we tend to bring schools and districts together across the state and also a little bit regionally in the Southwest United States. We're also an implementation expert. So we've got a lot of folks on our team that are former teachers, former principals, former superintendents, and our CEO is a former commissioner in Colorado at our State Department. And so we have a lot of expertise, from the classroom that we often go out and support current teachers, leaders in doing their work. And so our team essentially focuses on a few different areas. Social emotional development is a big area of focus, along with equity efforts across our state, two of which obviously everyone knows have been getting a lot of media play lately. And, so we're thinking about different frames because we have a lot of rural communities in Colorado that are very invested in this work. And sometimes the framing of that matters. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. But the ideas of hope and belonging are things that we're doing a lot of in Colorado right now through our work. So we tend to have a lot of touch points in schools and districts across the state. Currently have 50 to 60 district partners that we're working with. This likely will be amplified even more in the next year, given some relief funding grants that the state just put out to support rural districts with career connected learning. So this is an exciting time for our organization, and those touch points to schools and districts and the fact that we have a team of educators is one of the reasons why we partnered with Grit Digital Health in this effort. So Nathaan, I'll pass it to you.
Awesome, thank you. So quick introduction of me. So Nathaan Demers, I'm a clinical psychologist, taken somewhat of a non-traditional career path, if you will, but did a lot of clinical work, mostly focused around adolescents and young adults, from therapeutic boarding schools to integrated primary care and college counseling. And after that, I joined a nonprofit implementing large-scale systemic interventions in the Western 15 states and American territories in the Pacific. And that just got me really excited. And I very quickly learned that there aren't a lot of clinicians working at that higher level of care. Instead of one student being my client, all of a sudden Alaska was my client, or American Samoa. And I really fell in love with it. And then 6 years ago, I think tomorrow, now that I think about it, I actually joined Grit Digital Health, and we are a multidisciplinary team living at the intersection of behavioral health and technology. So we have clinicians like myself, marketers, designers, technologists, and we all come together to make tools that raise awareness, provide psychoeducation, skill building, and then refer users to appropriate care. And as I'm sure you guessed, what brought both of our organizations together is the ability to work together to transcreate one of our initiatives from the college space into the high school setting. And I'm going to kind of Quentin Tarantino and go back in time and then forward, so bear with us, but we will get there. So we also had a bunch of great polls, and I contacted our polling software, and it is broken. They have a bug. They're not sure when it's going to be fixed. So if anyone feels comfortable just chatting in these couple of questions, and no worries if not, I know some people are on the phone, don't worry at all. We can skip this one, but where you're coming from, your primary role. And then I'm just curious, in your experience or your work, obviously we have a lot of different people with different scopes of work. I'd be very curious just if loneliness is something that you see and feel in your everyday professional life with those that you're providing services to. So I'm just going to give it a quick second and pause and let people type. For those who can, if you're in the car, please don't even try. But everyone else, please do give it a shot if you feel comfortable. Thank you, Susanna. Absolutely all the time in respects to loneliness. It might even be easier if folks just want to answer that question. I'm totally fine. Wow, well done with some folks following just directions. I know that was a lot. Rule number 1 is don't give multiple instructions, and I just gave 3. You should have been better. All the time, yes. Lafayette, Colorado, Boston, Mass. I'm an intern with the Upswings Fund, also MS, part-time in mental health. Definitely feel loneliness is a challenge all the time. Awesome. Well, thanks to those of you who have chatted in, and please keep them coming. Don't be shy. The other thing we want to do is a quick activity. And again, I know some people are on the phone, and for those of you watching this afterwards, feel free to just blow over this because I don't think the breakout rooms are going to come through. And also just a quick disclaimer for everyone, we won't be calling you out in this one way and asking you to interact again to this level. So what I would love everyone to do, I'll send us into breakout rooms, and would just love everyone to really quickly answer one of these 2 questions with your partner. One is simply compliment one another on something distinctive the other person's wearing, or 2 is answer about what your go-to outfit was in 4th grade. So I'm going to pause my screen share for a second, and I am going to break you into breakout rooms. You'll just have about a minute, so it'll be pretty quick. Hang on, breakout rooms, and I will be zooming you away right now. Enjoy, everyone. And well, welcome back, everyone. I know that was super short and probably felt like not nearly enough time, but I know whenever I do this activity, I generally ask, like, how are you feeling before, on a scale 1 to 10, and then how are you feeling after? And afterwards, just about everyone says, I feel so much more connected, present, my mental health feels better. And at the end of the day, this is what we're trying to get students to do. These are the very simple skills and the building blocks to friendship that can actually make a difference in students' overall trajectories. So I hope you all felt some level of connection and or enjoyed that activity, but it's a great demonstration of exactly what we're trying to get students to do. So I'm going to go back in time, and again, please feel free to interrupt and just tell you the background about how we made Nod, and then I'll be kicking it over to Emily to share more about the implementation, the transcreation, and hopefully spur a lot of discussion.
Hey, Nathaan, your screen is not sharing right now.
Oh, how's that?
Oh, there it is. Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. I had it paused. Really appreciate that because I would have just kept going. So to jump in, this work was all a collaboration between ourselves and Hope Lab. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar, but they're a social innovation lab based in San Francisco. And they wanted to address the issue of loneliness, recognizing that it's something really negatively impacting the mental health and well-being of adolescents and young adults. And the unique thing about addressing loneliness is that it cuts across race, gender, SES, sexual orientation, gender identity, you name it. So it's a very human experience. And by even moving the needle 1, 2, 3, never mind 5, 10%, the impact that we could have is just vast. So Hope Lab found our organization's Grit Digital Health because we're really experts in working with adolescents and young adults, specifically from our work with you at college, which is a mental health and well-being platform that's now live at about 200 campuses across the country. And as you might be familiar, Hope Lab's approach is partnering with organizations that then can administer, distribute, and maintain these tools in the world while Hope Lab moves on to other interventions. So just to very quickly set the stage, I know we're probably a very educated audience on this topic, but we know loneliness has been on the rise in a very negative way for the last, not quite decade, but coming up on it. And we can do a whole nother webinar on the whys, the hows, and all that, but not today, unfortunately. We also know that Gen Z is unfortunately the loneliest living generation. A lot of folks have the misperception that loneliness is only an affliction of aging populations. And when we look at the data, and one thing to note is that this is also pre-pandemic, so these numbers have also gone up very significantly. And the reason we decided to start our work in the college space is that when we take youth and move them from many of their home settings or high school settings, and not all, so please acknowledge that, but many students do choose to leave and leave their home networks and go to college. That's an incredible time of vulnerability, because if I'm a student who has had the same friend group from K through 12, for example, or if I met friends through sports and I've just had those friends for years, I haven't necessarily had to practice the skills or flex those muscles of friending for maybe years. And if I'm from a rural location, I've worked with many students who are from rural Colorado, then end up at CU Boulder, and they're all of a sudden a member of a 10,000 person incoming class, that can be incredibly overwhelming. So the data speaks for itself, and that the majority of students are feeling lonely. I was going to ask this poll question, but you can just think to yourselves, what percentage of students at a large state university reported feeling socially alone as a major contributing factor to stopping or dropping out? And I'm just going to jump to the answer. Normally, it's really fun to watch these bar graphs populate and we can have some friendly banter, but not today. The answer is 41%. And the reason this data point is so important is that a lot of times, unfortunately, change is only driven by a return on investment, which is such a bummer. But if we want to get colleges and high schools and other places to actually invest in changing student behavior and arming them with skills, we have to prove that it's going to make their lives easier. And at the end of the day, it's going to impact their bottom line. So this data is so important to have on hand when we're advocating for change, especially amongst, and no offense to them, but the C-suite, so to speak, or upper level administrators who aren't boots on the ground, might not be experiencing and seeing the negative impacts loneliness is having with youth. I'm not even going to talk about this one. COVID made loneliness go way up. I think everyone gets it. High schools, colleges, our lives, and everything in between. So to very quickly operationally define loneliness, it's the gap between the relationships that an individual has and those that they desire. Why that's so important is a lot of people conceptualize a student who's alone on a Friday night as lonely. If that student tends to be a little bit more introverted and has a few friends that they can turn to when they want, that student's not experiencing loneliness. On the other side of the curve, I could be the valedictorian, star quarterback, beloved by everyone on campus, but if I don't have the depth of relationships that I desire, that means I'm experiencing loneliness and all the negative health outcomes. And this is important to remember because we all wear masks, especially during this very challenging developmental time. We're all putting our best foot forward, especially students, and we're not showing that loneliness might be having the negative impact that it is. So to get into the science behind loneliness, we know that students who feel socially connected are correlated with a wealth of positive health outcomes. I've never had anyone say these are things I don't want at my school, high school or college. But then on the other side, we know while loneliness is not a diagnosis in and of itself, it places students at risk for increased anxiety, depression, substance use, susceptibility to illness, dropout, as well as self-harm and suicidal ideation. And when we look at trends of overall mental health and students seeking services, we know that our systems in high schools and colleges simply can't keep up. So if we're able to address student loneliness when it's at that subclinical level, this can have a major downstream impact on student mental health outcomes and just the challenges we're facing in respects to service capacity. So in all our research with Hope Lab, we did 18 months of research. We worked with over 50 experts. We interviewed over 100 students, and we always make sure to oversample students from historically marginalized communities. And you can see your data there. Just have to clear my throat, excuse me. Plenty of pollen here in Colorado right now. So what we identified is that a lot of students enter college and high school perceiving the social environment as threatening for any of the reasons that I mentioned before. So what they do is they take a bit of a guarded approach socially. And when students do that, what happens is they might meet someone like myself, or I might meet Emily, and I'd say something like, you know, I met Emily and she seems really nice, but I didn't get to know her because she was experiencing loneliness and kind of holding her cards tight. So what doesn't happen is I don't go out of my way to ask Emily to work on that homework assignment or to sit with me at lunch. And if that continues to happen as students don't have a breakthrough, what happens is they start to consciously and unconsciously criticize themselves. They say, I'm not doing something right. I can't find my people. Maybe they're halfway through the fall semester of their first year in high school or college, and they're saying, all these people have found their friends around me and I've missed the boat. So there's something wrong with me. And then from there, unfortunately, psychologically, what happens with many students is they start to say, I'm experiencing this, I'm not liking this, and I don't know what to do about it. So they further say and draw the incorrect assumption that there's nothing they can do about it. So they further take a guarded approach. The reason we identified this model is until you have a model, you can't have a way to fix something. So once we identified that model, we then were able to start designing and make a tool to interrupt that negative downward spiral. I'm going to go through this all very quickly because I really want to give Emily plenty of airtime to talk about the implementation and everything. So I'm going to go very quickly over the science of this. But we did do a randomized control trial. I'll show you the results of that very quickly. But we know that students who use NOD do indeed experience decreases in loneliness and increases in social connection, which we know is correlated with decreasing anxiety, depression, suicidality, and increasing retention. And the way that we do that is by getting students to engage in these 5 things. I'll very quickly go over them. One is help students hold realistic expectations around friendship. When we look at the media and movies, a student goes to the club fair and they magically meet their friends, they join a cappella or a sports team, and then, they find their partner, they get married, they're having reunions 40 years later. We know that's not how it works. It takes time and effort to form friendships, and we need students to understand that. Secondly, we have to make sure students have a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. We had a lot of students say things like, I wasn't a social butterfly in high school, but I will be in college. The reality is nothing changes in 3 months from high school to college. If they initially don't experience that success, they draw the incorrect conclusion that, well, I guess I'm just not a social person. When the reality is, just like anything else, if you put the time in, you can get the results you desire. Third, we have to get students into the real world, practicing the building blocks of friendship. We know if we just go make friends and put a bunch of students in a room, that's not only not helpful, that can make loneliness worse because I'm surrounded by people and I don't feel like I can connect. Fourth, as I mentioned, students who tend to be either lonely or depressed tend to be focused on themselves. So they tend to be thinking, like, if I was lonely right now, I might be more focused on, did that joke land? Oh, my polls weren't working. These people think I'm a joke. This presentation's a huge failure. And that makes it very difficult for me to be present in any sort of relationship. So we have to help students focus on other people and practice skills. And then lastly, we know every social relationship has setbacks. We have to give students the tools to be able to overcome that when it happens. So very quickly, we made an app with 3 main components: testimonials, ideas, and reflections. And I'd love to poll the audience really quickly. Would it be helpful to go through what the app looks like in about 3 minutes, or jump ahead and let Emily talk a little bit more about implementation? So I'm going to turn to the chat and see what the masses say. For those of who can chat in. Quick overview, curious, would love to see it. Okay, got it. Thank you. So testimonials. These, what we clearly heard from students is, we don't want to hear about friendship making from you, Nathaan. You're some old weird psychologist, and that's not going to help me. I want to hear from peers. So what we did was we collected hundreds of quotes from students about their friendship making journey. So stories like, my freshman year, it was really difficult for half the year, but when I put in the time and effort, I actually got the results I want. So this is helping students normalize that it takes time and effort to form these friendships. And then also it's giving them real stories from real students who are just like them that experienced the same thing. So this helps adopt that growth mindset. Secondly, we have to get students into the real world practicing these skills. So what's so different about this app, it's not about liking, sharing, messaging, and staying in the app. The whole goal is actually to put the phone back down or in your pocket and go have a conversation with someone. And these are all based in cognitive behavioral therapy, the science of social connections, and are practicing the building blocks of friendship. So this quick video will show you what that looks like. We give students a lot of choice throughout the app to be able to identify areas they want to work on. The most common one is getting past the small talk. Students say things like, I can talk about what's for lunch today, but I don't know how to get to that next level of friendship. We give them tools, we explain the why behind it. We heard that loud and clear from students is don't just tell me what to do, tell me why this is important and how this can help me. And then, of course, in light of COVID, we give students the opportunity to do it virtually or in real life. And we give them the opportunity to have notifications. I'm sure we're all familiar with the phenomena of we forget to do something that's a little bit anxiety producing. So these notifications can be that slight positive nudge and reminder to go out and do it. So this helps students get into the real world and take those social risks, as well as practice things like active listening and self-disclosure, which draws their attention towards others. Then lastly, we learned that how someone processes a social interaction is equally important, if not more important, than how that social interaction goes. So we make sure to create space for students to reflect on their progress. So this video will go, there'll be a little sound towards the end, but we let students choose how doing that activity made them feel. And then we let them choose a very quick interaction to help them either harness their motivation because they just did a new thing, which is awesome, or help them identify, you know, that didn't go exactly how I wanted, but you know what, I did something new. And of course, it's not always going to go well on the first time. So this is a quick game that helps students draw the parallel between automatic thoughts and their current experience. Here comes the sound. So as you can see, it's a quick game of whack-a-mole. It takes a lot of cognitive capacity to succeed. So it can snap someone out of a negative thought pattern in the moment and then draw that parallel to say, you know, a lot of those thoughts you're happening right now, bop them down just like you did those moles. Give yourself a pat on the back for trying and keep that momentum. So this helps students apply that compassionate lens. So I know I alluded to this, I'm going to do it super quickly. We did do a randomized control trial to see if this app actually works. If anyone wants to nerd out about it, I can send you the article that was published or talk about it. But we did get significant results that when we get students to use this app, and the key therapeutic dose is about 30 pages. So when students engage with about 30 pages, whether that's in one sitting or over 10, they do indeed report decreased loneliness and depression with some awesome secondary outcomes of improving sleep quality, campus belonging, social support, and their intent to persist. So that was a lot. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, but I'd really like to kick it over to Emily to talk about our shared work, transcreating it from there.
All right. So app was obviously available to folks at the college level. And what Nathaan, we didn't get to share just yet was that when COVID hit, 2020, Grit Digital Health actually let everyone use this app for free. And that was an amazing opportunity because a lot of high school students downloaded it. So they knew they were onto something in the college space, but they also got like affirmation that at the high school space, there's a need here. So Grit Digital Health went ahead and participated in the Headstream Accelerator and was able to do some of the work with high school students then, and then wanted to think about how do we bring this to the high school experience in Colorado. Can you advance the slide? So we partnered, we applied for the Upswing Fund grant and were awarded this, which enabled us to move forward with that ability to transcreate for the high school space. And so what we wanted to do was think about, you know, CEI is really engaged with a lot of districts around the states. We wanted to design a pilot that could leverage existing partnerships and not have us start over with that. Obviously, we had such a significant issue with COVID. We had a mental health crisis that continues to be on the rise today. I think all of us thought like, oh, we're at the peak, we're gonna be done. But what we're seeing in schools and districts is no, in fact, we're like seeing an impending dropout crisis in Colorado right now that people aren't equipped to handle. I'm sure this is a national issue, but in Colorado, we're seeing it head on in a lot of our closest district partners, and nobody's offering solutions right now. And so this is an opportunity where we can help, as Nathaan said earlier, to bring some of the responsibility, that burden that's on our counseling teams, that's on our school staff, and help students self-advocate and learn some skills. So we're really excited about that opportunity to bring this to high schools in Colorado. We were able to partner with several high schools during this initial pilot research stage. And as Nathaan mentioned earlier, we recruited students that represented BIPOC and LGBTQ backgrounds, and that was really important to our counselors as well. And so they were helping us to recruit the students, and 67% of those that participated in the research and co-design phase self-identified as being LGBTQ and BIPOC. So really important. Here's just one picture. This obviously happened during the summer of COVID 2020. So what we were able to do was we did have one in-person session, but then work with the students over a series of weeks virtually, where the students were able to engage with the app and reflect through some daily journals, add content. We had some prompt questions. They were able to add content or change content in the app so that we would make sure content was appropriate for the high school audience. So here's a few of our students engaging with us at that time. Really great experience to get them in on the early end and help us. I also want to mention that our research and co-design process obviously is not a randomized controlled trial. Our focus for this was really bringing that content into the high school space and then us evaluating our implementation. We didn't know how it would go in terms of bringing this into high schools. What would that process look like? How do we get folks to take on this app and not see it as one more thing, but instead integrate it into their daily experience and the resources that they can offer students? What we found from that was students really wanted to hear about NOD from a trusted adult. They also wanted to have a significant role in sharing it with their friends, colleagues, peers, networks, etc. That students were engaging with it over time. We didn't prompt them throughout those couple of weeks to engage with the app. They did it, reflected back to us, so they were engaging over a period of time. And then students really wanted to make sure that there were both the virtual and in real life experiences. They really liked the opportunity to kind of toggle between the two when safe. So that's that. Next slide. So this is something, and feel free to interrupt as much as we want to and stop here. I know I've talked to Sierra about some of the challenges that other organizations have experienced during COVID and other times as well in terms of recruitment with districts. So this is something that our organization is always in the position of working on and has developed a set of strategies that we typically use. That's not to say that these always go 100% smoothly. So fortunately, as you've seen already, Grit Digital Health has some amazing graphics. So we were able to build some really beautiful collateral and communications material that concisely explained, what are the benefits of NOD and what is this pilot opportunity that we're asking them to participate in. CEI has several districts that we work with. We identified those that we knew were prioritizing social emotional development, and we did some personalized recruitment through that existing list of partners. What is often most effective in our world is in-person sharing of opportunities, especially if we haven't, we don't have the deep trust yet with the district. So we had the great opportunity through some social emotional work that we were doing with Kaiser Permanente to present, and also Caring for Colorado, which is a local health equity focused foundation, to present this pilot opportunity in person. And I have to say that's when we were most successful with recruiting people. The email people, we all know this. Our email boxes load up, so we don't often pay attention to everything that is there. So really important to know that in-person is something that we often have most success with. The other thing is that we have a newsletter that goes out to all school districts, district leaders. We can filter that by different roles in a school district: principals, counselors, superintendents, teachers. So we're able to reach targeted audience with specific messages that would help them to understand the opportunity. And so we were able to do that through email. We did have amazing challenges during this time. One of which was just the fact that, again, we anticipated 2021 back to school would be a lot easier than 2020. It was not. School districts were having battles in their school board meetings about masks. They were having battles about critical race theory. They were having battles about, safely opening schools, closing schools, all these things. And so it was not an easier time to get the attention of our school and district leaders. At the same time, we knew that this was a resource that would be like relieve burden from their teams and help students. And so we were able to get through some of that noise by engaging our leadership team, some of my colleagues that have, been working in the field for 20, 25 years to do the outreach, and we were successful on that end. I'm going to just pause for a moment and take a look at some of these questions.
I think we're good on the questions.
Okay, we're good. Okay,
Emily,
sounds great.
But if folks do have them, I'll try and flag them.
All right, thank you so much. So like I said, I've visited a lot of this already in my last one. Something that I wanted to point out is down toward the bottom, the exploring district versus school entry points. So what's important to know about our strategy is that we really wanted to make sure this got into the hands of high schoolers. And so therefore your school leaders, your school champions need to be on board. There's an interesting dynamic in Colorado between our districts and our schools. And oftentimes we see quite a bit of disconnect between those district staff and school staff. And so a lot of our work is helping them to manage that pace of change and connect and align and be on the same page a little bit better. So we understand a little bit about how we need to get our school champions on board, but you also have to have your district leaders, particularly because of data privacy and data security. You have to have those district leaders on board. So we toggled a little bit back and forth between having those conversations. And again, it's something that you just have to be thinking about as you're getting folks on board, particularly with a technology, intervention that requires some level of approval for data. So I know Sierra just asked a question similar to this, but I would love to hear, if you all had any common barriers that you experience with recruitment and outreach, and just would love to hear a little bit about those. If any of the barriers, we shared were relevant, or if there's others that you wanted to elevate here to the rest of the group. You can come off mute.
Jill and Mark, yeah, for chiming in.
Yeah, there's that you wanted to unpack. Access to internet, loss of employment in households, huge. In rural Colorado, that was absolutely an issue. We had a significant issue with connectivity, particularly in rural areas, and so had to have hotspots. And in fact, phones ended up being the way that a lot of students were able to connect, but that is still a barrier for others. Any other barriers that you guys want to dig into here? Okay. We can go to the next slide. I also wanted to just, go through some of our recommendations, but I would also love to hear, what worked really well for you all in terms of recruitment and outreach strategies, so that we can share those strategies with the rest of the group. So some of the things that we find to be really helpful in the Colorado context is understanding the problem and challenge, and really authentically honoring the voices and lived experiences of your students and educators. So we're not going in with a solution that is not something that is, that leaves students and educators out of the design. So that was, student-centered design has to be critical to the development of your solution. Relationships, trust, and context matters. I think this is like a given, but it's worth noting, because sometimes people are jumping in and not recognizing the context or the folks that are, the partnership that you're working with. I think something that people are often a little bit caught off guard is timelines for schools and districts. When are budget decisions made? When are implementation decisions made? And that's critical in terms of starting and initiating your conversations with a school or district partner, is that you're just aware of how does that work in your school district or the districts that you want to partner with. Point of contact, thinking through who has the decision-making authority, but also who could be your champion? Who is this going to help and support? And therefore, who could you get into those conversations on the early end is really important. Again, probably an intuitive, obvious one, but it's something that we go through every time we make a decision process about outreach and recruitment. I've already spoken to the school and district support. And then finally, I mentioned this as well, Colorado is very ahead of the game on putting in legislation related to data privacy and security. So there are quite stringent requirements there to protect students and families. And what was a huge part of our process was working with schools and districts to understand kind of what their requirements were versus the state. And you know, Nathaan and I were talking last week about, even though we did a whole lot of research on and literally getting the data agreements that the districts have in place and copying that language and putting it into ours and adhering to those, we still had issues with that after the fact and had to go back and adjust data sharing agreements with them. So just important to have on top of mind that you're thinking through data security and data privacy if you're handling any kind of evaluation or feedback, or you have a technology intervention. Okay, so really quick, we had 8 schools and districts commit to this initial pilot launch. You can see kind of where they are in the state of Colorado. We got a great mix in terms of size and geographic representation. Obviously, we'd love to be further out around the state, but this we felt really great about the folks that signed on and were on board with us across Colorado. The way our implementation worked is we had our school and district champions that were brought on board and oriented to what the pilot would be like. We had them then think through what were their strategies for engaging their school. Several of them brought on board other educators that would be kind of their champions or sub-champions in this process. Students played a huge role in doing peer-led orientation to the app. And then finally, counselors, obviously, you know, we're very passionate about this, but they weren't always the ones that were those champions. So really making sure that counselors were on board and aware of what this resource was pretty great. So that's a great question, Sierra. Upswing Fund enabled us to provide the app free of charge to all the pilot districts, and we obviously had a lot to learn through this process. We are currently in conversation with a couple local funders because we would like to expand on this pilot and make sure that access continues to be free, particularly as we are in the learning stage. And you know, we're a nonprofit, and as Nathaan and I were talking about last week, we need to keep the lights on as well. So this is something that we're trying to balance. We'd love to have a funding model that you know, can be supported by schools and districts. We polled all of our participating pilot schools and districts and asked them if they'd be still willing to participate if we did not have philanthropy foundation funding this next year. We did get several positive indications that they're all in, and we obviously all of them would love some help with supporting this moving forward. So great question.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add there, Emily, what you said, but just to make it explicit, we very much feel we're still in that learning phase. And when we can prove that there's strong outcomes in high school, that there's a clear return on investment, that it's going to help with truancy, for example, and things like that, that's when it feels like, okay, great, we can ask schools to help, you know, ideally make it a line item and just an essential extension of counseling centers. But of course, if we could do it through philanthropy and scale that way, that would be even better.
Yeah, thanks so much, Emily and Nathaan. Just kind of related, and this might be on a farther roadmap, is are you thinking about, you know, folks on this call might be from, you know, states across the country, like how can they bring this to their state if they're interested in either a pilot or an expansion in some way? Any advice there?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Emily, and then you can jump in. But we have had a handful of schools raise their hand, you know, just kind of all over because they saw a TV story or something like that. And the best way is to reach out. We are very good at getting creative and saying, you know what, let's try and find a local foundation or a larger funder, or like, let's talk to some legislators and see if there's enough oomph behind this to, you know, make this a statewide thing. But we have some materials and some one-sheeters that kind of have enough information to say, give this to the person that might be that decision maker, and then let's hop on a call. But as you know, we're pretty early on, and the way we do it is like kind of figure it out with some pilots and go from there. And then we'll identify a tried and true way that says, here's our playbook. If you're interested in implementing this, this is the way to do it. And our team's here and happy to help. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, those are great questions. Part of implementation I want to make clear is that, you know, the app is one tool and resource, but as Nathaan said, we're hopeful that students actually are on it and kind of right off and trying out these ideas. And so part of the way that we've been able to do that is create a suite of resources and tools and marketing materials to draw students in and be interested and engage and get a feel for the app, and then hopefully spur some use. But we're really interested in addressing loneliness, and that can take shape in different ways. So you can see a lot of the marketing materials here that are literally, you walk into high schools that are piloting this, and our champions had this everywhere, which was so cool to be, I was in a school in Kremlin, Colorado, which is like way up in a like northwest corner of Colorado. It's amazing just to see Nod everywhere. We also give teachers, champions, activities, like an activity toolkit that are very short, 5 to 10 minute activities they can do. And what the feedback we're getting is these are awesome, like orientation, new student activities. So several of our high school partners said they want this to be day one, something they do with their students. We had schools and districts do just so many creative things, and I'll tell you about that in just one moment. But we're really excited that a lot of that toolkit of materials really helped us to launch it effectively. Next slide. So you can see here, we would love to have had, this is our reach within our schools. Some numbers are extremely low. We had challenges with getting the schools, even though they signed on to the pilot, to engage. We would love for this to be closer to 80 to 90% of their population using the app. Wasn't that case. But those that did use those marketing tools, we saw a lot, like just incredibly better outcomes. So we know that that was an effective support for them. And what we saw, and Nathaan, you can jump in here too, is Nathaan told you earlier about, when we tend to, once that threshold of when we tend to see effectiveness in terms of addressing loneliness. So we were really excited that the average session per user was about 6 times, just over 6 times, but that the pages that they use each time was 13.85. So we blew out of the water the kind of minimum level of use and dosage before they see an impact. So we are really excited about that. Again, even though this was not a randomized control trial or a test to look at really the outcomes here, we're seeing early indication that we would see those positive outcomes.
Mm-hmm. The only very quick thing I'd add is obviously Nod is an app to combat the issue of loneliness, and not every student is experiencing loneliness, and or not every student is ready to address that as a challenge. So, as much as I would love 100% of students to use this app, realistically, our addressable target audience in schools is probably between like 40 and 60%. So when you reframe that, we're actually doing pretty good overall. And if, again, we could prevent one student's loneliness from elevating into clinical anxiety, depression, substance use disorder, or dropping out, that is a huge win. And I think just conceptualizing it that way is really important to keep our scope of scale in mind.
I'm going to go pretty quickly. Oh, let's show this. We're going to show this.
You want to? Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Just moving things around.
I'll just give you guys some framing. Yeah, we had some outreach from local media once they were hearing about what was happening. And even though we don't have students with us today, this gives you a little sense of how students experience the app. So.
Thanks, Veronica. When the pandemic hit, we talked about how kids are so resilient, flexible, and adaptable. But after adapting to remote learning, this year, a lot of young people have had to relearn what it's like to be normal again, including just how to make friends. Loneliness is a big issue for today's teenagers, but a new app developed here in Colorado hopes to help. So really, this doesn't look anything like a social media app. No pictures, no likes. But while Nod is not a social media app, it is about being social. And it comes at a time when kids have lost some of that ability.
After a lot of isolation, it felt like it was only myself that I was with. And I became truly an introvert, and I just was unable to communicate with other people.
Seniors Amira Sierra and Jaden Moscato have spent half their high school years in a pandemic.
You kind of lose your connection to the real life relationships you have. And then you kind of forget the aspects of that and how to even create them. So the app is definitely helping with that.
This year, 8 high schools in the metro have free access to the Nod app. It's thanks to a program that's looking for ways to use technology to improve social emotional health.
The way to get to students is through their digital device. And so we want to enter into the conversation there. But then really what's cool about the app is you are not in the app for a long time.
Nod gives students specific tasks and prompts them to get out of their own bubbles.
Students who are either depressed or lonely tend to be overly self-critical and in their own heads. So the app is all about practicing skills like active listening and self-disclosure. We're giving students the opportunity to engage in mini missions where they get out into the real world and actually try those skills.
They're skills that don't come as naturally as we might think.
I'll find myself in situations and notice like opportunities to make connections that I wouldn't have noticed before without the app.
It pinpoints the things that I think teenagers struggle with the most.
Now, Amira starts her day by setting goals instead of scrolling through feeds.
It just elevates my morning because instead of starting off this destructive cycle where I'm thinking about, oh, I'm not that type of person, or thinking about these negative things, then I can set my mood and my tone for the day through happy meditations or just goals that I want to meet.
Much better way to start the day. The Colorado Education Initiative will collect feedback from this year's pilot program and hopes to make the Nod app available to all high schoolers soon.
So I just wanted to have you guys listen to some of the students who are actually engaged in the pilot. I'm going to zip through some of our pilot evaluation, but be happy to share a little bit more later on. We just wrapped up our pilot with a set of focus groups that were with students and then also with adults. We recorded, transcribed all of the analysis, or for all of the focus groups for analysis purposes. Some of the things that we learned, I started to get into this before, but we saw quite a bit of variation in how they launched the app. We gave them a lot of leeway. We didn't have a whole lot of prescriptive advice about how to do this, but based on where people found success, we now would offer key strategies that they would use for their launch. So we heard a lot of our, particularly more rural schools, had full school assemblies where they downloaded the app right there. People would log on, they troubleshoot if they had any issues. It was fantastic. That worked so well to get everybody on the same page and moving from there. Peer groups led the outreach, so students were trained in what the app was, and then they went out and shared the app with their friends and with other advisory or homeroom classes. That was hugely successful. Embedding in advisory classes, which is a kind of a homeroom class where they focus a lot on social emotional development, was extremely successful as well. This was dedicated time where they could engage with some of those short 5 to 10 minute activities and then get to know their peers a little bit better in that setting. Those were the top 3 most successful ways of getting the app out to students. Adults used all of the tools. We had overview, video, marketing kits, lots of materials for them to engage with, which helped them to do the work. What we learned was we didn't always get the word out about that toolkit as effectively as possible. We did have some teachers in the focus group say, it'd be great if you had some activities. So what we realized is that our onboarding process is going to be a whole lot more comprehensive, and we're going to take it from the champion level down to the educators that are actually implementing and work with them on understanding the tools and resources they have to make this easier for them. So that's that. What this is a quote from one of the seniors. I mean, how the students are so articulated and understand these very complex issues and challenges. They also understand what helps to make an app launch successful. So what we were really excited about was how simple this was and how simple we made it for both students and teachers to kind of learn about it and take it out. So that's just overwhelming feedback that we got about how streamlined that onboarding process was. Next. Some of the things that they noted that was really helpful was that it helped them to students to build connection in their classes, schools, sports teams. We had freshmen talking about how they were worried about connecting with seniors, and they were able to use some of the tips in the app to talk to seniors in their sports teams. And it was just like the applications were kind of endless in how they got to know students. Building confidence is one of the key areas and objectives of the app. And what we found was not only was it something they did within that kind of content area, but they also built confidence across all of the areas of focus in the app. So students were reporting back to us that, you know, when I got past the small talk, I actually felt really good. I just did something successful. So we knew that the app was, doing some of the things that Nathaan had talked about before in terms of celebrating those small wins, and students were feeling it. Students wanted more. They felt like, oh my gosh, I did this. I got through this conversation. How do I take it to the next level? So we knew that they were like getting deep with and seeing the value add in the app. And then they also identified several other areas that they thought they wanted to see more content developed around. Next slide. I'm just showing you a couple of quick quotes. Love this one from one of the freshmen. "Nod has helped me to see the other side of people." So getting past that superficial view of who they are, who they thought they were, to something more. Got some great ideas from students. They really wanted competition. Over and over, we heard from every level, from freshman to senior, we want competition in this app. So we've got a couple cool ideas about how to do that, both inside and outside the app. Student groups were huge, and I've already spoken to this a little bit, but they kept saying, use us. We want to be part of this. We helped to design it. We want to be a part of getting it out there. So we thought that was fantastic, just to emphasize that. And then notifications. Students said, I'm going to forget about this sometimes. I'm really excited that it can notify me, and when I could do this again, they wanted to hear that more, or they wanted to see that more, so they could be reminded. I know, right?
I think if you're open with it, I think we hit our key takeaways, and we can send this in the recording. I would personally love to open it up for questions, discussion, and make sure Sierra has a few minutes for any other logistics, if that's okay with you, Emily.
That's great. Any questions, ideas, reflections? We'd love to hear what you guys are thinking.
I just wanted to mention that this is just very innovative, and it's so great to see that students are finding other ways to connect, and they're getting excited about it. I just think that's great feedback, and that shows that this work is very valuable.
Thank you. That is exactly, we feel really fortunate to have had this opportunity, and we are seeing such a need here for connection and belonging. So.
Hey, this is DeMarco. I second what Mark just said, and I know you all mentioned earlier, like some handouts and informative resources we can pass to our school districts or representatives. Is there a website I need to go to get those, or what would be the best, I guess the best way, especially if I can like email blast out to like teachers or healthcare providers in our district?
Yeah, I am happy to put in my email, and I can follow up with that. I'm also going to put the website up, but because this is a pilot, it's not like public facing and everywhere. So if you shoot a quick note, I'd be more than happy to make sure to get that one sheeter to you and any other information that might be helpful.
All right, thank you.
And Emily, if you're open to putting your email in the chat as well, feel free to reach out to either of us. And, you know, we can also hop on a quick 10-minute call and just kind of give you the nuts and bolts and answer any other questions, if that would be helpful.
I'll just add, if there are others on the call who are interested in or have the same question, I'm happy to help coordinate that call. Just reach out to me as well, and I can kind of coordinate with the team. While I'm off mute, I just wanted to say thank you again. I really appreciated how everything was so digestible. I mean, it's just starting from the definition of loneliness. I think that was the simplest definition I've ever heard. And it just really showed how accessible you're thinking about making this for all students, and not just students, but, you know, teachers and administrators, and just helping to demystify tech, I think is so important. And so I think this is really exciting work.
One insight we didn't get to talk to, just building on that, demystifying tech. So we made this playbook, and it's very flexible. So, you know, a coach might implement it different than a homeroom teacher, than, you know, a guidance counselor. But and we heard like some coaches took the initiative and like ran with it. But we also know there is that barrier of tech literacy, and we learned that being more prescriptive. So basically having like, you know, a 3-slide deck that says, if you're a coach, this is how you implement this. If you're a homeroom teacher, this is how you do it. So those are the learnings that, you know we have some work to do, but that's the nature of a pilot, and then ideally expanding a pilot to take it that next step.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I wish we had another half an hour, because I think this is so interesting, and thank you both for sharing all of this and sharing your contact information. We are at time, and again, thank you to all of you who joined. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me or Emily or Nathaan, and just again, to the team, great work. This is really exciting, and I can't wait to see the day where this is across all high schools and available to all students across the U.S.
Thank you. Thank you,
everyone.
Upswing. Appreciate it.
Yeah, hope to be in touch, everyone. And thank you for facilitating and hosting and everything you all did on the back end. I know that's never easy. So thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.